My name is Maeve Miccio. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships in the Eastern Region for Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Delighted to be here with all of you this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit today about partnerships for impact, theme du jour. Just a little bit of background about Silicon Valley Community Foundation. We are a large community foundation based in Mountain View, California. A huge portion of our work is making a difference in the Bay Area. So we have a team of folks that work really hard on issues like affordable housing, immigration, education, transportation, and public policy. But we also have the great fortune of partnerships with individuals, families, foundations, and companies helping to facilitate their philanthropy through donor-advised funds and other charitable vehicles. Last year in 2017, we made $1.3 billion in grants to organizations domestically and globally. Really proud of that number. This year, we're continuing on with that good work. In 2018, we've had an interesting year, and as a result of some things that have transpired, we've been doing a ton of work around values. And so I wanted to frame our conversation today around values-based partnerships and how values can really make a sustainable and a sustainable difference that leads to greater impact. So one of the definitions that we're using at our organization for values is agreed upon beliefs and behaviors that allow the mission to come to life. And this is something that can really transcend the organization, whether you're a nonprofit, a company, foundation. Some examples of different organizations you might be familiar with and the values that they have committed to are up here on the screen. And I think it's kind of interesting to take a look at your organization's values and the values of your partners and see where there might be some similarities and also some differences, because the contrasts and the similarities can really come into play, because values show up in a lot of ways. So thinking about how partnerships are formed. So a lot of the times we talk about, for instance, the value of transparency and how funders make funding decisions. What is your experience in terms of understanding what a funder's decision-making process is or what their expectations are? And then, of course, measuring success and how you get there. And so if you think about the previous slide, we have the Gates Foundation. One of their values is rigor. An organization like WeWork, one of their values is entrepreneurialism and being entrepreneurial. So, that could be incredibly powerful and complementary, or it could lead to, some tension or some challenges in working together. So it's really important, I think, to be mindful of those things. And then, of course, if there's a bump in the road in terms of the partnership, values can show up in that way too. So is the partnership able to pivot and sustain its impact, or is that going to be a challenge? And so that's something certainly to consider. And so wanted to walk through a couple of examples of values-based partnerships in recent years. So one value is courage. And this is an example of Levi's. I'm sure you're very familiar with them. Well-known brand, really taking a leadership role on progressive values and being steadfast in their commitment to values over many years. And they had taken a stance in 2016 around gun violence prevention. And they immediately received threats. It was a big business risk for them. But then this past September, the CEO put out an op-ed in Fortune, really even taking a more bold stance and putting together a fund to support organizations like those listed on the right that are doing incredible work in the gun violence prevention and youth activism space. And in addition to that, he really worked to create and lead a business coalition to get business leaders invested in this area. And I think it's a great example, because when you think Levi's, it might not go naturally hand in hand for gun violence prevention, but this is an issue that they felt, was a moral obligation, and they really wanted to put a stake in the ground on that. And so they really were able to accept taking on risks as a result. This is an example that's close to home. We have an initiative within Silicon Valley Community Foundation. It's incubated in our organization. It's called The Big Lift. And it's really a bold social venture. It's focused on transforming early learning in San Mateo County. And San Mateo County is a county in Silicon Valley, and if you're familiar with Silicon Valley, you might know that there's an extraordinary concentration of wealth. but there's also vast income inequality. And so in San Mateo County, 50% of third graders cannot read proficiently. And so we knew, and all organizations working in this space kind of knew, like, we're not going to be able to solve this alone. We need to work collaboratively together. And so they formed a collective impact model where they're all kind of working together, nonprofit organizations, the school districts, county government, coming together to really transform early learning. And when they put together this model, one of the kind of tenets of what they wanted to make a big part of this was transparency. And so they hired external evaluators. They regularly published their results. They held community meetings to discuss the results with parents. And one of the kind of interesting outcomes of that is that they found that depending upon what district your child was in, they would be assessed for their kindergarten readiness differently. So, you know, depending on what town you're living in, your child may or may not be considered ready for kindergarten. And ultimately, through this work of collaboration and transparency, they decided to form kind of uniform guidelines that would be applied across all of the districts. And it was challenging in that there was politics involved. It influences how funding flows, all of that stuff. But ultimately, they felt that it was really important to create a level playing field for kids in San Mateo County. The final example is commitment, and something that I think many of us have observed is that with partnerships, a lot of the time there is a pressure to demonstrate results and outputs very early on, and it's challenging to have a kind of longer time horizon. And we have the fortune of working with a family of donors in our portfolio that are very committed to sustainable agriculture and animal welfare. That's the cause that's most dear to them. And they've been making grants to organizations for many years, but they ultimately decided they really wanted to double down in their commitment. And so what they decided to do was kind of layer on an impact investing approach to that. And so they're now investing in startup companies that are in this space that may or may not have returns for many years to come, but they said, you know, we're willing to take on this risk because we're so committed to this issue and we really want to be in this for the long run and make a transformative difference. So through their advice fund, they've been investing in companies ranging from like sustainable farming to 3D printed sushi. It's really a wide range, but it's pretty cool to be a part of. And just to wrap it up, I think you know, we're really at a moment in time here, particularly in the United States. Values are at the forefront of our daily conversations with our colleagues, with people in our community. And we've seen that a misalignment of values can create challenges for partnerships or even be a non-starter in some cases. But when values are aligned between partners, it can really lead to a more sustainable and deeper impact. And I'm excited about the work that we're taking on around values, and I really believe that it will help us have even deeper and more impactful partnerships with nonprofits, with our donors, and with our community.